Welcome to the E-commerce Profits Podcast, where we feature top founders and experts in the e-commerce industry and take an in-depth look at the struggles and successes in growing e-commerce brands profitably.
All right. Hey guys, Josh Chin here. I'm the host of the E-commerce Profits Podcast, where we feature top experts and founders in the e-commerce industry, and we go behind the scenes of the struggles and successes of growing a brand. Now, this episode is brought to you by chronos.agency. Now, if you run a direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand that is ready to scale and to double your customer lifetime value through owned marketing, Chronos is your company. We've helped hundreds of brands scale profits with email, SMS, and mobile push, while getting an average of 3,500% ROI from our efforts. We've worked with brands like the Udi, Truly Beauty, and Laya Skin, and many more. The next step is to email us at sales@chronos.agency, or you can go to chronos.agency to learn more. Today's guest is none other than Andrew Youderian, the founder of eCommerceFuel, an amazing community of e-commerce entrepreneurs, operators, and experts helping each other scale and grow their business and professionally, and build deeper relationships with one another. After a few years in the investment banking world, Andrew decided that he's had enough. He decided to quit his job and start his first e-commerce business. Since then, he sold numerous stores over the years, collectively generated millions of dollars. He's had experience bootstrapping, exiting businesses, as well as building amazing communities along the way. And today he's bringing all of that and sharing his knowledge and curating a list of incredible people in the community through eCommerceFuel, which is a private community for e-commerce founders, as well as an amazing podcast, one of my favorite. Go check out his recent episode on eCommerceFuel podcast with Steve. Again, last names,
Chu.
Steve Chu. I know that's a Chinese last name. So in Chinese, I believe it's Chao, but I know that no one pronounces it that way. So it's Steve Chu. Amazing episode. I loved it. So go check that out. eCommerceFuel podcast. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the kind intro. And I have to chat with Steve because he's a good buddy, but we also rib each other quite a bit. So I'm going to tell him good authority that he's been mispronouncing his name for a while, and throw him under the bus for that. So.
That's what makes it fun, right? I mean that's entertaining, and I think that's where the most learning happens, because you feel like you're part of the conversation when you listen to the episode. So, Andrew, tell us a little bit more about your background. Give us a high level overview of the community that you've built.
Yeah, I mean, you did a pretty good job. Went to school for finance, got done investment banking for 2 years. It was one of those things like I think many people have in their life. Super glad I did it. Super glad I'm not doing it anymore. And quit because I wanted to start a business. So I looked at a bunch of stuff and decided, hey, this e-commerce thing looks interesting. Started a drop shipping business selling CB radio equipment. A couple of years later, started another e-commerce business selling trolling motors, and ran those for a number of years. And along the way, just met a bunch of interesting people doing stuff in the space. Started blogging about it at ecommercefuel.com. Met all these fascinating people and built a community around that. So since then, I've kind of sold those two businesses and focused full time on running eCommerceFuel, which is a vetted community for 7- and 8-figure e-commerce brands.
It's interesting because I've been an eCommerceFuel community member in the past, and the people in the community, it's a private forum, so it's been incredibly high level, but at the same time everyone's super giving. What I found is that people are giving first before taking, and when you have a bunch of givers in the same room, you build a community that's not just for today. It's long lasting, and it will tide through any changes in the space. So I'm super impressed. I think I personally feel that it's one of the best private communities out there in the e-com space today. And interestingly, you do no promotions, no marketing. I'm not sure if that's changed, but it's all through referrals and word of mouth. And people know about the community through just, things like the conversations like this.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the kind words. One of the things one of our really two core values guide how we try to run and monitor the community. It's reciprocity and respect. On the reciprocity front, one thing we do is everyone who comes in, we require everyone to share a case study to add some value right up front to the community. And then even on an ongoing basis, I won't get into the weeds on this unless you really want to talk about it, but we have some internal thresholds where if people come in and they're just mining the community for information, how to do this, how to do this, how to do this, how to do this, without giving a lot back in return, we kind of tactfully either chat with them and make sure that changes, or respectfully show them the door, because any relationship isn't viable long term unless it's two ways, unless people are taking about the same amount of stuff. So, but in terms of the marketing, yes, you're correct. We traditionally have done almost zero, practically no paid marketing. It's all either referrals from people, content marketing, the podcast. We're doing a little bit of direct outreach to people in about 7 or 8 cities that we're trying to really build some on the ground community. But apart from that, no, it's been all kind of organic word of mouth.
Interesting. What cities are you building communities around?
Yeah, so we've got this next year we're doing a bunch of events. The 4 big cities are Charlotte, Austin, Salt Lake City, and Los Angeles. So we're doing some regional events there once a quarter. Nice. We're doing an annual event in Norfolk, Virginia. That's kind of our big event. And then we've got a handful of other cities, Toronto, Chicago, a handful of others where we have kind of regular quarterly meetups with local members. But that's kind of where we're focused.
And you have ECF Live as well coming up in March next year.
Yeah,
that's still happening, right?
It is. Yep. Where it is. Knock on wood here, assuming the world doesn't kind of blow up or devolve in the next 4 months. So, but yeah, it's our member only event, and we get about 250 people together to talk shop and have fun and hang out and make some lifelong friends for 3 days.
Awesome. I love that. And one of the reasons that I left, and I'd love to come back, if time permits, was not because I didn't enjoy my experience there. It was because everyone was so engaged in the community and so involved and so giving. And I joined at a time in my career where I had just no time to allocate to be engaged at a level that I feel was meaningful for the community. So I told Patrick, right, the community manager, that I don't feel that I'm contributing enough in the community, and I should give up my space for someone else who might be a better value add to the community. And that's just how much I respect the forum, and it's great to see that it's growing. And everyone I've spoken to about the forum in the space have had nothing but good things to say. So I'm very happy about that. Now, talking about your core values, Andrew, I know that you have a set of personal core values that you carry with you through your personal journey. Is that in any way related to the values that you bring to the table with eCommerceFuel?
Yeah, a little bit of bleed over, perhaps, but they're definitely separate. So, yeah, and it depends on the facet too. Like we have some core values for our company. We have, and then kind of some slightly different ones that guide our moderation, and then kind of stuff in my own life that I think through. So, yeah, I think those are different ones.
Gotcha. So shout out to Dr. Jeremy at Rise 25 and Inspired Insiders for making this connection. And also you appeared on his podcast at inspiredinsider.com. And one of the things that you guys talked about was a little note card that you have with you all times throughout the day, or at least in the morning, where you read out certain affirmations that you'd like to live out in the way that you like to live out your life. Is that still the case? Has anything changed since then?
Oh man, this is kind of embarrassing because I think I did that podcast. It's been a while, maybe 9 or 12 months.
I think it was in February. Yeah.
February. Okay. So maybe 2 months ago. I do not have that note card still anymore. So
it's part of you now. It's ingrained, right?
Oh man, potentially we'll see here. So definitely I'd like to think so, but I have done a bad job of keeping it around and reading through it. So yeah, a little mud on my face for that one. I like the homework
Okay.
though, man. Impressive job on the homework here.
Thank you. But you know what? That's a problem that I face too. I often come to a really really interesting idea that I really like. Most recently, it's having no project management to-do lists, task lists at all, and having it all live on my calendar instead. So I would have like color-coded events that represent different tasks that I'm supposed to do. And I'm supposed to optimize my tasks in a way where I'm spending 80% of my time on type A tasks where they are important but not super urgent, and the rest kind of delegating to people. But that was such a hassle because what I had to do was I had to go through the um I had to go through like a list, and I had to migrate that list onto my calendar and then review that calendar at the start of the week and re-review that every single day. And that did not stick for long. It was like a week long kind of a thing.
It is hard on a scheduling front. Like I feel like I have taken probably 3 or 4 stabs at like really trying to dial in a schedule that works. Because if you're thinking about scheduling your time, like to run any kind of meaningful business long term, you need to be able to do deep work, think strategically. You need to work with your team. You need to be able to allocate time for like making connections with people in the industry and talking marketing, like keeping your industry knowledge sharp. And there's all 5 or 6 different buckets, and you need to be able to do all of them well or reasonably well over a long period of time, and it's hard to manage them all. Anyway, so I've taken my first stat like a stab at doing that. It's worked a little bit better, but it is hard to getting a really dialed in schedule that covers all those bases that you can stick to, and you can stick to for the long term. That's hard. It's tough.
And I feel that from what I understand about you, it seems like you have a good balance between your family life, your personal life, and your business. And it appears that every one of the facets of your life are flourishing at the moment. Um, how do you manage that? Because I believe that life comes in seasons, and sometimes you kind of let a ball drop here and there, and sometimes you get like carried away with one thing more than the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone. I wouldn't say that every single facet of my life is flourishing. There's definitely stuff. I think everyone has. Nobody can have. You can't have everything all the time, right? Like, and I'm no exception, or other people aren't either. I think that's probably part of the one of the travesties of like social media is it makes people think that's the case. But I do try to like,
All right, yeah.
do try to have balance is something that's important to me. I think apart from the first couple of years when you're building something, which is really hard to build a business and have a life in balance. I think that's a good time to buckle down and really just go out of whack to get some momentum for something. Yeah, it's been something I've tried to maintain in my life, and how to do that. I think, I think batching. I'll probably talk about things people know a lot, but like trying to batch like phone calls. Like today is like the day where I connect and have like the whole day is scheduled for team calls. I call it, I'm super cheesy, but talking in Team Tuesday. I've got like this little chart here that kind of
nice
of all my days. I try to put something on them. And so I'll do podcasts. I'll connect with my team. Like if there's kind of random calls, I'll kind of put them in there. And so yeah, kind of like you were talking about, trying to block out the days. So like Monday, I try to allocate to marketing. So yesterday I didn't have any calls, no meetings, and it was an awesome day because I spent 6 or 7 straight hours just diving deep on marketing, getting some new stuff off the ground, reading a bunch of stuff, which was fantastic. Having an office outside of the home helps tremendously, I think, in terms of being productive. And I'm very binary. I either like to be on and working or like off and hanging out with my family or my friends and not try to have less of the in between. So I think I don't think there's necessarily any, a lot of stuff I would say would just be kind of maybe tropes that people have heard before. But I think the big ones are just trying to batch. I try to leave most days by 4 p.m. so I can get home and hang out with family. I think it's a combination of a lot of little things that kind of hopefully come together over time and help you get more stuff done. So I think also like understanding what you want to do and not. I think focus is a huge one. Like I've over the years tried to do a lot of things and still have a decent number of balls in the air, but being comfortable doing less and having more margin in life, I think is a big deal too. So.
That's a big one. Being comfortable with doing less and so you had a 0 call day. Like, was it yesterday?
Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm.
Zero calls. That's incredible. I think that's a luxury in what we do today.
It's funny. I mentioned that on Twitter, and I was just like, days like this, and I actually used that exact phrasing. I was like, hey, the real luxury in 2021 is like zero calls, zero meeting days when you can just dive deep on work and reading and learning and improving and building.
Yeah.
It was one of my, I mean, it blew up. Like a lot of people were like, yes, this is amazing. I need more of this in my life. So I think I think
Because we're
it's a
living on
widespread
Zoom every
belief.
single day now. This is our life, and I mean, in our field of work, it's been the case since day one. But now everyone's shifting to online work only and leading with online conversations and not having the boundary between work and living and play
Mhm.
and life. And I mean, some might disagree. I mean, to some, work is life. I'm kind of like that way. Like work and life is kind of intertwined. Um, but with that, right? With the e-commerce fuel community, what are some of the large scale trends that you've seen people shifting towards in the e-com space as we move into kind of the cookieless world and where Apple is taking over, privacy is number one, and all that stuff.
Yeah. So specifically focused on kind of marketing and cookie stuff, or just everything in general over the last year?
I think so. Marketing for sure, but anything that relates to growing an e-commerce brand, I think a lot of
Yeah.
people are saying that it's. Um, I think you might agree that growing an e-commerce brand in 2021 and beyond, it's probably going to be a little bit harder than what it used to be. Um, Even though it seems like everyone's coming up with new businesses every single
Hmm.
day.
Yeah, I think it's going to be dramatically harder. Sorry, what that looks like. I mean, obviously, Apple took the hatchet to tracking, and so I mean, we looked at Facebook, and it's just anyone running a brand right now on Facebook knows it's a lot harder. Your results are, your return on ad spend's way down, effectiveness is way down, and it's just harder to use that channel. So it's a big deal, and I think in general, that's going to be a trend that we're going to see going forward quite a bit. So I think, what was it? We did a poll in the community about what the actual hit was, and I think the average merchant, at least in our community. Our community probably has the average merchant size probably about 4 million in sales, 4 to 5 million. Um, was their return on ad spend, or I think we used MER, I think, media effectiveness ratio potentially, but it was down on the ballpark of 40%. So like,
Four
spending
zero.
40, yeah, at least
Holy
for what
shit.
people responded. Yeah, it was big. So it's a big deal. I think going forward, um, yeah, people just aren't going to be able to rely on paid ads as much. Like it's Facebook now, but even if that doesn't happen, like there's so much more competition. You either have to arbitrage different platforms, new platforms that come out that have, aren't as crowded yet, like TikTok potentially. And that works, but only lasts for a little while. But even still, like the number of new platforms coming out is much smaller because they tend to be bought up by legacy players, the big guys, Facebook and others. So I think for marketing, people are going to have to do a few things. I think we're going to start seeing more zero-party data. That tends to be the buzzword of the last couple of months. But I think I'm seeing more people start to install platforms that help with that. I think good old-fashioned referrals is going to become even more important, which is just having a great product, great customer service.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna see the average size of a business be smaller going forward, because you're going to have to earn business and reputation and credibility and word of mouth marketing the old way. Not overnight, but I think unless something changes dramatically, if this trend continues, it's going to be a lot harder to build $100 million business. You may have raving fans that are raving fans of a business that are 5 or 10 million or 15 million. But I think just in general, it's going to be harder to build scale. I think the defensibility of businesses will probably on average increase, because the ones that stick around are earning it with merit versus paid scale and spending. Because you can totally blast your way into people's mind and mental share if you have enough money. But if you can't spend that money quasi profitably, it gets harder to do. I see community being an aspect. The number of 5 years ago in eCommerceFuel, the number of people that were talking about building e-commerce brands with some kind of community. And I don't mean community in like this ethereal sense of like, oh, we have customers and occasionally they tweet about us. And so we have a community. No, I don't think that counts. What I'm talking about is like you have a discrete group of people in some kind of gated or walled area, i.e. a Facebook group maybe, or a private forum or something like that, that where they're connecting, they're talking. I know one company that uses Reddit. They have a Reddit subthread just for their brand that they've used to drive sales, get customer feedback. Some kind of discrete community that helps you build loyalty and communicate with your customers, but also bring in new converts into something greater than yourself. The number of people I've seen using communities to build 7-figure e-commerce businesses has exponentially gone up the last 3 or 4 years. I think that's going to be something we'll see more of. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking because I'm rambling at this point, but a lot of little threads. But long term, the biggest thing is paid ads is harder. Cookies make it harder. And I think the average size of stores will probably get smaller and you're going to have to work harder. But the businesses that do survive and thrive will probably be more defensible as a result.
And I think the community bit is on point. In our space with what we do with clients, we have about approximately 80 clients in our retainer. So we get a lot of data and information as well. The insights that we got is that that acquisition is going to be really, really hard. Obviously, new platforms are going to come out and experiments are going to be run, but overall, acquiring a new customer is going to be exponentially more difficult. So retention then becomes much more important. But when we think about retention and the stuff that we do on the back end, like email, SMS, and all that stuff, there's only so much that you can do before you bug someone out. Mm-hmm. But when you're building a community of people, the network effect that you get from having multiple nodes, and you notice the best, right? Of having multiple nodes of really passionate people about a certain topic is self-sustaining and most importantly, self-growing. Can you speak a little bit more to that and how eCommerceFuel came to be in the first place? Like the first 100 members, your first 100 fans, what was that like? And how did that change over time?
Yeah. And to speak to that, just before I get to the kind of the genesis story, people, when they hear, anytime you're hawking something, the threshold for how hard you have to work to convince somebody is much higher because they know you're a brand, you have a vested interest, right? Like if you can have a community speak for you, it's much more powerful. Just that's why word of mouth is so powerful. For example, we had somebody who was thinking about coming to our annual summit, eCommerceFuel Live. It's for members of our community. And he had something else. He was signed up for another conference, another e-commerce conference. And he was asking me, he's like, hey, like, I've got these 2 conferences. I can't decide like which one why should I come to ECF Live versus this one, or should I? And I said, hey, listen, I'm biased. Don't ask me. Go post this in the community and see what people say. And so he posted it and like people weighed in and they were like, here's why we think this would be a better fit for you, et cetera, et cetera. And it caused him to change his plans. They come to our conference. And like anytime you can get a group of people to do that on your behalf, it's so much more powerful than you just spending money and trying to convince them to do that. To your question about like the early days of eCommerceFuel, like communities are kind of like they're classic chicken and egg problem, right? Like, how do you build a community? You need people there, but if there's no one there, like how do you get people to come? Yeah. And so the tactic that I used was spent a year blogging about e-commerce because again, I was in the trenches really and had at the time a really deep sense of kind of the day-to-day tactical stuff. I spent a year doing nothing but blog and connect with people about it, trying to build up an audience and connections in the space. So probably 3/4 of my time for a whole year was dedicated to that, and built up this list of 150 people I met along the journey that were really interesting, that were smart, fun, respectful, like had some expertise in their field. And I used that to seed the community. So I, over a course of, 30 or 60 days, dripped about 5 people per day in there and just slowly started starting discussions, introducing people, connecting people, tagging people in discussions. And then we kind of started to get some traction and some people talking. And then I put up a small paywall, really small, $25 a month or something. And it kind of grew from there. It probably took it 18 to 24 months before it was a really self-sufficient community on its own without needing to have people, myself or my team really get in there and moderate things and spur discussion. But that was kind of how the process went.
It takes time. So people listening, Man, I see so many brands try to artificially kind of create a community. I guess in some cases that would work, especially if you're seeding it with kind of like paid effort. But the sustainability of a community, like what we see with eCommerceFuel, is it comes organically through just the quality and curation of the community. Um, what's the future of eCommerceFuel? I know that at some point, so I'm part of EO, Entrepreneurs
Mhm.
Organization, and I'm in the Singapore chapter, and we're coming towards a kind of a decision point where we're approaching the 150 member mark, where in above which we would most likely have to split into two chapters. And Singapore happens to be a really tiny country. It's like, I think it's 30 miles wide and 18 miles long. So a very tiny country. So the reason why we're choosing to split them up into two chapters instead of keeping them as one huge chapter is that there comes a point where a community will no longer be kind of, you won't be able to know everyone in the community anymore. And it's really important for EO to have that sense of kind of belonging and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But when it comes to scaling communities, could you share a little bit more about your thoughts around how you're scaling eCommerceFuel, and if you're ever going to split the forum up into multiple chapters?
Yeah, that's a good question. So uh, there's something called Dunbar's number, and it's I can't remember who it was, a scientist,
Dunbar's
maybe a
okay.
sociologist, and he or she, it's embarrassing. I don't even know. You can see how much I know about this person. They found that the number at which a group dynamic starts to really lose its intimacy is 150, or stated differently, that
That
the average
explains
person,
it, right?
yeah, the average person can probably keep about 150 relationships reasonably going at any one time. So yeah, there's some definitely merit to that. For eCommerceFuel, like I think that's communities are incredibly powerful. They're incredibly defensible. Who's going to, especially if you have deep ties there, you can't replace, these unique relationships. The downside is like community takes a ton of time to build. Like true, genuine community takes a long time to build, takes years, and you can't scale it really quickly, right? Like if we have about 1,100 members right now. If we went in and over the course of the next 6 months, we dumped another 1,100 members in there, it would totally kill the dynamic of the community, because people post partially because they trust the people, they know them, they've seen them, they have rapport with them, or at least some level of people they see in the forums every day. So yeah. I mean, it takes time to build something like that. We've built it over a long period of time. And in terms of scaling eCommerceFuel, I probably don't plan on like dramatically scaling it up over time in terms of like trying to, do that quickly. It just takes time. And I think there is though, you do have to have, and we've thought a lot about this, 1,000 people, you can't have connections with 1,000 people. So any type of big group like that, that's one of the reasons we're investing in these events, right? Like, is trying to build out more. There's a lot of value in having access to 1,000 really experienced e-commerce entrepreneurs, because the breadth of experience, what they can weigh into, the fringe things that they've seen. Maybe you're experiencing something that only 4 or 5 other people have experienced. If you have 1,000 people in that crew, you can pull out those insights. But for the depth of relationship, that's why we're investing more in a lot of these regional events. So, the Austin event or the Charlotte event or things like that. Those will be smaller events where maybe 50 to 75 people from that area will come and gather, and you can definitely manage those relationships well. We also just had an event with about 30 to 35 of our 8-figure e-commerce sellers, and they can connect deeply there. So I think any good community, if you're going to scale it, you got to think through, how do I, if it's going to get larger, meaningfully larger than that, than those, like kind of 150 or even, 200 number, you got to think, how am I going to think about providing an identity and value to the main group, but also give them the sense to go deep with a smaller group of people, because you have to do both at once.
Right. That makes sense. So you're effectively creating mini communities and mini groups within a larger community, a larger identity, essentially.
Definitely.
In what cases would you recommend putting money behind the growth of a community, especially when it comes to an e-commerce business where it's B2C, kind of where the relationship isn't as tight knit as what we would expect from eCommerceFuel? where it's business and brand and maybe tens of thousands of customers.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think one of the other struggles too, if you're trying to like grow a community, is a lot of it is you're building fans, word of mouth marketing, things like that. And sometimes those are harder to gauge and track than just direct, like, top of funnel, bottom funnel clicks. And you're investing more for the long run. So if you're thinking like, how much would I afford to spend? How much would I afford to spend to try to get someone into my Facebook group that is driving a lot of this traffic? That's a hard thing to answer. And I don't think I have the answer to that. I do think the more, if you're trying to think through what's an easier sell for someone, like, is it easier to, if you're running two ads and one is like, hey, we've got this amazing group of skateboard enthusiasts. They're all in their 30s. And that's the niche, right? Like, people in their 30s who are picking up skateboarding later in life, come join this forum and talk about it and share that. The barrier to sign up for that, especially if it's a free community, is much, much, much lower than, hey, come buy, this brand new skateboard that we have that's designed for people approaching, getting back to skateboarding later in life. So I think if you're willing to invest the money there, very few people are building communities and also building communities kind of with some of that paid stuff. So I think it's an interesting avenue to explore. From a attribution standpoint and a how much should you spend standpoint, that's a harder question to answer. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose there would be a way to quantify what one community member is worth to a brand. In some proxy manner, it might make sense.
Yeah, I was just trying to think about that. It's kind of interesting thought experiment. Like, for example, let's say you had you could see on a post-purchase survey, 40% of sales come from a community, right? So I heard about this through the community. So maybe if your sales are $1 million per year, you say, okay, well, we generate 400,000 through the community. Let's say we have 1,000 members. So maybe we know that each community member is worth $400 in revenue per year. Our margins are 50%, so they're worth $200 and on average. So I mean, maybe you could totally back into some math like that. So hey, maybe we'll spend to add new community members at, if we're getting them if we're getting signups for $15, pretty safe margin of error. Yeah, I've never thought about that like that, but you could probably do it.
And one of the things that we talked about is that that network effect, the nodes of people, and maybe that contributes somewhat to the fact that every new community member is a little bit more valuable than the last one. Maybe. What do you think about that?
I think it really depends on the quality of the members. One thing that we have been kind of unapologetic about is trying to, if you're going to have a community is defined by, you don't want to be exclusionary to be exclusionary, but you do have to have walls that go up. So I think, we've over time raised the threshold for revenue and in general, unless people have a strong recommendation or we know them well, we generally don't let agency owners in, because there's some great ones like yourself, but there's also people that will come in and just pitch the community and they're not a good fit. Yeah. So I think to the extent that you are keeping those boundaries and those guidelines, you really have a lot of follow through with those. Generally, yeah, a second community member is going to be more valuable as long as you're not growing too quickly, and as long as there's time for the community to kind of digest is a terrible word. I'll use it anyway. We're talking about people, but to digest who they are and get to know them, and like without dropping a ton of people in at once. But yeah, in general, I'd say you get those network effects. That's why Facebook blew up so much. Probably a bad proxy for the type of communities we're talking about building, but in general, there's some cool network effects for sure.
Andrew, what's coming up in 2022 for you that you're excited about?
Yeah, probably the biggest thing is just we're getting ready to roll out a ton more events. This last year, we've done a couple, and every year we've done ECF Live for, 6 or 7 years now, but really investing heavily in events, like I mentioned, and we've got a Los Angeles regional meetup for our members coming in January. We have 3 other meetups that I mentioned. We have ECF Live in Norfolk in March. We have an adventure trip coming up this spring, yet to be determined, but there's a very good chance it'll be either a mountain biking trip or a surfing trip or a skiing trip. Lots of local meetups in Toronto and New York and San Diego, all over the place. So the thing I'm most excited about is, as the world's kind of coming back a little bit more to a state of normalcy, getting people together again and getting store owners together in a place where they can share a meal and talk about what's going on in their lives and their business.
It's so meaningful. I think that we often underestimate the power of face-to-face in-person meetings, the ability to connect. It's so much more powerful. I was at LA a couple of weeks back for the Geek Out event run by Nick Shackelford and James Van Elswyk. It was incredible. It was a relatively smaller group of people, of about I believe 50, 60 people. That was a great crowd, highly curated as well. And everyone was there to share. And they've been cooped up for so long as well. And just coming out to an event like that, it was just incredible. Unfortunately, there weren't much movement because in California, there are a lot more restrictions around events and such. So we had to stay confined within the same location throughout the whole 2-3 days. But 4 days actually, but it was great. It was actually really great.
The Geek Out event. That sounds really fun. What did they talk about there? Like, what were the topics?
Oh, we geek out about all kinds of growth stuff. So we talk about growing e-commerce brands and every facet of growing e-commerce brand. So we have people coming in from fulfillment companies, SMS. We talked a little bit about adapting to Facebook and changes that comes with Facebook, all kinds of stuff. And when you have 60 people at varying specialties, all at a very high level, I believe the average revenue in that room, annual revenue of businesses in that room was over 8 figures. It was I think something along the lines of 12 million, if I'm not wrong. So it was a really high level of people and that makes it such that everyone had the mindset of, I want to give as much as I can, because I know that I've been given so much in my journey that the more I give, the more I'll eventually receive. And that makes all the difference. So one of the things that we talked about was actually the iOS 14.5 update. And I spoke a little bit about iOS 15 and its impact on email. But it seems like the control is coming back to the consumer a lot more when it comes to data and all that stuff. And you mentioned zero-party data. So that was actually one of the topics that we kind of dived into, and how to kind of structure a conversation and with a prospect, turning that conversation into something that's actionable in the back end with segmentations and automations. But what do you think is the future going into 2022? How do we adapt? Are there specific channels you would recommend we look into? You talked about TikTok. I know Twitter is coming up with their e-com stuff as well.
Yeah, I think the channels that make the most sense are, and I really wish I'd coined this term. I always feel like I'm just hijacking it, the owned marketing by Klaviyo. But I think anything you don't have to have a gatekeeper to get through. Right. So I like SMS. I think that's interesting. I don't use it personally, but the number of store owners I've seen that use it there's one of our eCommerceFuel capital portfolio companies uses SMS incredibly effectively for launches and promoting products. Like they'll send an SMS text and just watch their analytics just explode in terms of people and sales. It's really cool. SMS, I think, still has a lot of reach. Like email, if you're still doing it well, there's some complications that you probably know better than I do with Apple and iOS 15. I like Twitter, although Twitter I don't think is a great D2C tool. I think it's really interesting for B2B. I think it's really interesting for making connections in your industry. But I like that. I think direct mail is something that is interesting too. We're starting to do some of that with eCommerceFuel. Like we have a really engaged membership base. I think 75% of our members visit at least once a month. And I think it's something like, maybe 30 or 40% visit at least once a week. And even still though, like people are just busy. Like the amount of stuff that is just thrown at all of us every single day that we have to go through is digitally, especially, is just overwhelming. But when I get a piece of mail, when I walk to the mailbox, usually I'm coming back. It's something tactile. I can read at night. It's on the table. Ironically, there's less competition for that. So we're starting to do some mailers for eCommerceFuel just to try to add more value and help people keep up on like the top discussions in our community. And I've heard good reports. I mean, I know brands that generate 50, 60% of their sales through some form of direct mail or catalog. So it's
really,
it's by no means dead. So I think,
wow.
Yeah, those are some of the channels I think are interesting. TikTok is a lot of talk about that. It's fairly new, and like any new platform, there's probably chances to build an audience and arbitrage. Anyway, all that I think. Can you still do, Google? Definitely. Facebook, less so. Yes, but I like the platforms that have a little bit more direct ownership. Podcasting, it's one that I've dealt with. I think that's harder on the DTC front or just direct to consumer front for.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, but those are some of the ones that come to mind for me.
Interesting. You mentioned eCommerceFuel Capital.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that. I think that's intriguing to a lot of people. And you're involved in a number of M&As through eCommerceFuel Capital, but also you've seen a number of M&As through your community as well. What's the overall goal of the capital, and what have you built?
Yeah. So ECF Capital the idea was a bunch of, got to know a lot of really interesting and smart and savvy folks in the e-commerce space, from marketing to Shopify to M&A to all sorts of different things. And there's all these companies kind of that are fledgling companies that are coming up that would love to have capital to grow, because e-commerce just sucks cash like nobody's business generally, in terms of eats it up as you grow. You just need to fund inventory. But also want some guidance along the way. And so the goal was to put those people together as smart money investors and partner with some of those brands. And so we look for brands that have decent margins, have good lifetime value, that primarily are off Amazon, that have really high repurchase rates, and that make a proprietary product. And try to invest in those. And so that's kind of the thesis. And done 2 or 3 deals over the last year, and learned a ton. And it's been a fun process.
Do you have an investment thesis or of some kind, or criteria?
Yeah.
For people maybe interested.
Yep. So I think in terms of brands, generally look at brands that need to be doing at least, bare minimum would be probably a couple $100,000 in revenue. Ideally more like maybe high 6, low 7 figures. Is kind of the sweet spot there. High repurchase rates, in terms of repurchase rates from customers, of at least 25-30%. Decent margins, gross margins of at least 50, ideally 60%, ideally off Amazon. And the reason of those is kind of looks into the future of a lot of what we've been talking about today. Like, it's getting harder to advertise. You need to have customers that love the stuff that you're doing. And if you have customers that love what you're doing, which is indicated by a higher repurchase rate, you're not going to have to spend as much to acquire them profitably over the long term. You have to do less marketing. You're going to have more word of mouth marketing that's built in. Amazon is kind of a two-edged sword, but that's getting harder. And so trying to find brands that aren't dependent on Amazon, have built something unique and that stands alone on their own .com. And just good margins are always a good thing, right? Like, good margins solve a lot of problems.
Oh yeah.
So that's kind of how those criteria kind of fell into the made it into the list that we're looking for.
I love it, Andrew. And where is the best place to find out more about eCommerceFuel, the capital, and all the good stuff, and all the events that's coming up?
Yeah, eCommerceFuel.com is the best place to just as a springboard for everything. So if you're interested in joining the community and you're a 7 or 8 figure store owner or merchant, or brand owner, would love to have you. eCommerceFuel podcast, you can find anywhere you get podcasts. eCommerceFuel Capital at eCommerceFuel.com. And then I'm on Twitter at Youderian. You'll never be able to spell it, but that's where I'm at. So
perfect. And as usual, guys, all the links are going to be in the description below. And if you're listening in from Spotify or any of the podcasting platforms, it is Youderian, Youderian. at Youderian on most social channels, right? Facebook.
Not really, I'm mostly a Twitter guy. That's pretty much where I spend my time these days. So,
Awesome. Yeah. And lots of good content out there. Definitely give Andrew a follow. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was fun.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the invite. It was really great chatting with you.
Thanks for listening to the E-commerce Profits Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get notified of future episodes.